Hi guys, so I thought it would be fun to compile some images of some plus size models to get a sense of how the Kibbe body types look at different weights. You guys know I offer consults through my website for Kibbe body typing, so if you are still confused about your body type, then I will leave a link down below to that. And I also have part 2 coming up of this video series, I guess, about comparing the different plus size Kibbe body types. So when that's available, I will leave a link down below to that as well. It's important to note that this video includes ladies who are not size 00, so that doesn't necessarily mean that they are even plus size. A lot of plus size models are pretty average size, but I chose to include them here as well, just to get a sense of the different sizes of ladies and how the Kibbe body type would look on different weights. But I already have a video on weight and Kibbe type where I talk about ladies at a very high weight and ladies at a very low weight and compare how the Kibbe body type is affected. And in that video, I compared these two ladies. On the left, we have theatrical romantic, and on the right, we have dramatic classic. And you can see that their body types still look different even through the weight that they are carrying. In that video, I also give some examples of ladies at much lower weights, and I really show that, or I hope that I showed, that you can really tell Kibbe body type no matter the weight of the person. And I'll leave a link to that video below if you're interested in watching it. So first up, we have dramatics. Dramatics have pretty long, narrow bones, and they also have a pretty straight figure and some angular facial bones, as well as some taut facial features, not very lush facial features. These two ladies here are dramatic. You can see that they both look pretty tall. They have some pretty sharp angular shoulders, and their bones are longer in their arms and in their legs, and their facial bones are also pretty sharp, especially on the right. You can see how sharp her facial bones are. At the same time, they are not very curvy. Their figure is more tending toward looking a bit straighter and not so shapely. Their facial features are also not very lush. They can have taut cheeks or thinner lips or almond-shaped eyes. When you take this dramatic angular skeleton and you add some softness to it in the flesh and in the facial features, you get soft dramatic. And you can see how these ladies still have angular facial bones and they have pretty angular shoulders. They do look a bit taller, but they also have some softness on top of this dramatic skeleton. They have some fuller lips, they have some larger eyes, and they also have a shapely figure. So they look very soft, very womanly, and very shapely. Here is a soft dramatic lady looking amazing in this really long shawl, creating a long vertical line and some glamorous hair. Next up, we have naturals. Naturals are sort of similar to dramatics. They have long bones and they can look pretty tall, but their angles are more blunt and their bones are thicker. But remember, they look tall most of the time and their bones are pretty long most of the time, and they also have some width. So here is a natural lady, and I could only find one example because pure naturals are quite rare, but you can see how she has some blunt angularity. She looks pretty tall, but maybe not as tall as the dramatics, and her facial bones look like they are a bit wider, bluntly angular. Her shoulders are more bluntly angular than the dramatics' shoulders, and overall she has an athletic look to her as well. So she does not have an overly shapely figure. She looks more athletic overall. When you take this natural skeleton and you add some bold yang, some sharpness to this primarily blunt skeleton and primarily blunt body type, you get flamboyant natural. So these two ladies are flamboyant natural, and you can see that they are primarily blunt. They have some width to them, and they also look like they have some longer bones, and they look a bit taller. Since these ladies get their bold yang undercurrent from the bones, you can see the lady on the left, she does not have wide shoulders. She has answer A, angular shoulders, and that is a part of her bold yang undercurrent. And the lady on the right has some more angular facial features maybe, and also looks really quite tall, so she has a very long vertical line, so that adds to her bold yang undercurrent, but they are both flamboyant natural. And of course, their flesh is also a bit more athletic and their figure is not so shapely. The bone structure is really important to pay attention to. You can see how both of these ladies are flamboyant natural at different weights, and you can see how they have a similar shape to them and a similar bone structure to them as well. Next up, we have soft natural. Soft natural has the natural skeleton, so some blunt bones, maybe looking a little bit taller than average, maybe having some longer arms and legs with thicker bones, maybe some larger hands with some thicker bones, some bluntly angular facial bones, a wider nose. But on top of this natural skeleton, we have some yin flesh, maybe a shapely bust line, maybe a tapered waist, maybe some softness at the hips, maybe even an hourglass figure, and some full lips, some round eyes, some soft cheeks. This is all going to be on top of the natural skeleton. So you can see how this lady here as well is soft natural. You could say to yourself, oh, she looks like she might be romantic or soft classic, but I would say she is soft natural because she does not look so small and so short like a romantic would, even though she looks soft. And she also has some longer arms and her hands look a little bit bigger, not so dainty like a romantic's hands would look. You can also see some width to her bones and to her cheekbones and jawline, so she's also not a soft classic. Underneath this softness is a natural skeleton, so this makes her soft natural. Okay, so next up we have romantics. Romantics have short, small bones and some shapely figure and really lush facial features and really rounded, short, small lines, small bones, so they look very small, very short. These two ladies are romantic. You can see how their arms are really short, their shoulders are rounded, their heads are a little bit larger in proportion to their bodies, so that makes them look like they're quite short too. And overall, they have a very soft look to them. Their hands are very small and their features, their facial features are quite lush. They can have full lips or some upturned eyes or some soft cheeks, and their nose is really soft, so everything about them is rounded and soft. And underneath this softness are short, rounded bones. You could say that this lady on the left has some angular cheekbones. I completely agree. I think she does have angular cheekbones, but I would say that one sharp answer is not enough to carry an entire yang undercurrent. I would say you really want 2 or 3 yang answers to be theatrical romantic. So I would say she is romantic. This lady here is also romantic. You can see that maybe she looks like she's shrugging her shoulders, so maybe her shoulders look sharper than they actually are, but you can even see there, even when she's shrugging them, just how rounded the lines are of her shoulders. She looks very short. Her nose is very dainty and small. Her hands are small. Her arms and legs are her arms are definitely short. I bet her legs are pretty short too. And she also has some softness. She has a shapely figure. She has a shapely bust line, and she looks very soft, rounded, and small. So that is romantic. Next up, we have theatrical romantic. Theatrical romantic is basically romantic with 2 or 3 sharp answers from either the skeleton or the facial bones. You can see on the left, she has some angular cheekbones maybe and an angular jawline, and maybe she doesn't look as short and small as the other romantics did. And on the right, you can see that this lady here looks a bit taller than the romantics did. So I would say she is theatrical romantic. The lady on the right also has a lot of answer D answers, so I would call those theatrical romantic answers if you have enough of them, but it really depends on the specific circumstance. Next up, we have classics. So classic bones are not too long, not too short, not too rounded, not too angular, not too wide, not too narrow. They are just in the middle, and it's the same for their facial features as well as their figure. So they are not too shapely, they're not too straight, not too broad, not too soft, but also not too angular or muscular, and their facial features are not too lush, but they're also not too taut. So everything is right in the middle. Someone in my comment section called the classic type the Goldilocks type, and I couldn't agree more. Pure classics are pretty rare, so I found just one example. So this lady, I would say, is a pure classic type. You can see she looks like she's of about average height. Her arms are pretty average in length. Her hands are not too small or too large. Her shoulders are not too wide, not too angular, but also not too rounded. Her figure is pretty moderate. It's not straight, it's not too athletic, but it's also not an hourglass shape, and her bust line and hip line are also not too shapely, but not too straight. So everything about her, of course, her eyes are not too round, not too almond shaped. Her lips are not too thin or too lush, so everything is right in the middle, and she is a classic. When you take this classic skeleton and you add some softness to it, you get soft classic. So these two ladies have a pretty moderate skeleton, so their shoulders are not too wide, not too narrow, not too rounded. Their arms are not too long, not too short, not too wide boned. Everything is pretty moderate, but they have some softness in their flesh. They could have a more shapely bust line. They could have some softer cheeks, maybe some larger eyes. And this is where their yin undercurrent comes from. It comes from the flesh and the facial features, but this softness is on a balanced classic skeleton. Next up, we have dramatic classic. Dramatic classics have a primarily classic skeleton and also classic facial features and a primarily classic balanced figure. So not too shapely, not too athletic, not too straight. So just in the middle for their figure. But they get their yang undercurrent from their bones. So you can see on the left, maybe her jawline is a bit more yang, maybe her shoulders are a tiny bit wider, and everything else about her is relatively balanced. And on the right, we have the same situation. She looks maybe a little bit taller, so that is a part of her yang undercurrent. And maybe she has some more sharpness in her facial bones. That's also a part of her yang undercurrent. So they are both dramatic classic. So next up, we have Gamines. Gamines are a mixture of opposites. So they will have yin and yang answers sort of mixed together in every single category. Their figure might be a mixture of yin and yang. Their skeleton might be a mixture of yin and yang. So they might look tall but have small hands, or look short but have long arms, or they might have the same kind of mixture, of course, in their facial features and in their flesh too. So everything is a mixture for Gamines. Pure Gamines are quite rare as well, so I was only able to find one, and I would call her a pure Gamine. So you can see how everything is sort of a mixture when you look at her skeleton, and her arms are a bit longer, but then her hands are pretty small. And then for her facial features, her eyes are not so rounded and her lips are not so full, but her cheeks are pretty soft. So everything is a mixture overall, and that is what makes a Gamine. But then we also have a special case of gamine, which is, well, two special cases, soft gamine and flamboyant gamine. Soft gamine has more yang in the bones and more yin in the flesh. And you can see these two ladies here are soft gamine. They have some longer arms maybe, but then they have some small hands, especially the lady on the right. And they have some pretty yin facial features, and they have some soft flesh to their figure. They have some more curves. These two soft gamines happen to be tall, but of course you can also be a short soft gamine. This lady here is a soft gamine, and she has some angularity to her bone structure. You can see she has some pretty long arms and maybe some, I think she probably has more angular shoulders there, but she also has some softness to her figure, and she looks pretty shapely, but at the same time her vertical line is short, so she has a mixture of yin and yang, but more yin in her facial features and in her flesh, and more yang in her bones and in her facial bones. Next up, we have flamboyant gamine. Flamboyant gamine is the opposite of soft gamine. So they will have more yin in the bones and in the skeleton and facial bones, and more yang in the facial features and in the body's flesh and figure. You can see these two ladies here are flamboyant gamine, and they have some softer, less angular facial bones, and they also might look a bit shorter, or they might have some short arms and legs, or maybe some rounded shoulders. So their skeleton is yin dominant and their bones are yin dominant. But then when you take a look at their figure, they might not have a very hourglass figure. They might have a top bust line or a boyishly tapered hip line. So their flesh and their figure is a bit more yang dominant, and their facial features are also a bit more yang dominant. They might have some taut cheeks in proportion to their weight. They might have some almond shaped eyes or some thinner lips. So, but still a mixture in each category, or a mixture in most categories, I should say. So that is flamboyant gamine. So that is it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. I'll leave a link down below to part 2, which is comparisons of the Kibbe body types using some of these examples that we used in this video. And of course, if you are still confused about your Kibbe body type, then I offer consults through my website, and I'll leave a link down below to that as well. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in part 2.